Remember, whatever happens, don't scream.
Hell, if I see one more of these...
Mary Shaw.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and as voted for by everyone in the latest poll, today we'll be exploring Dead Silence, the 2007 supernatural horror film written by Leigh Whannell and directed by James Wan, the dynamic Aussie duo that created Saw, Insidious, and the Conjuring series. Starring Ryan Quanten, Amber Valetti, Donnie Wahlberg, and Bob Gunton, it follows a man searching for answers after the bizarre death of his wife.
So you're trying to tell me that a ghost killed your wife?
I don't know.
What do you know?
Opening to creepy exposition, we're told that in the 6th century, it was believed that the spirits of the dead would speak through the stomach of the living, all coming from the Latin words venter and loqui, meaning belly and to speak, forming the word ventriloquist. As the opening credits roll, we're treated to a master craftsman toiling in her workshop, her goal, to create the perfect ventriloquist doll using her skill and unbridled rage. We're then introduced to newlyweds Lisa and Jamie Ashen in the present day. Jamie is attempting to fix their broken sink so they can start making dinner when Lisa proposes they have takeaway instead. But before they have time to place an order, Jamie receives an anonymous package at the door with his name on it. With only one way to find out who it came from, they unpack it to reveal a ventriloquist doll. Commenting on how real his eyes look, Lisa picks him up and begins playing with it. She also points out that it reminds her of an old poem from their childhood, a ghost story about a woman named Mary Shaw that was obsessed with dolls.
No one in this town dare speak Mary Shaw's name. They know she won't stop killing until the screaming does.
With Jamie picking up dinner, Lisa puts the doll on the bed and tells it to scare Jamie. She places it down with its head looking up, but after hearing a noise, she looks back to find it staring at her. A little bit creeped out, she covers its face with a sheet and puts a blanket under her stomach, feigning pregnancy. The music suddenly begins to distort in the living room, grabbing her attention. The sound of the kettle then dissipates to nothing as the noise of a child laughing from the bedroom draws her near. Despite how terrified she was, she approaches the doll using horror movie logic. She's then attacked and flung across the room before being dragged to her death. Jamie arrives to find the kettle going off and asks if she was trying to burn the place down. Hearing her laughter and voice saying that she had a surprise for him, he follows the trail of blood to the bedroom, only to find her disfigured face. Not only did he lose his wife, but Detective Jim Lipton tells him that he's the prime suspect in her murder. Antagonizing Jamie during the interrogation, the cop says that Jamie made a big mistake by bringing her a rose on the same day he killed her, citing the many times men have done this to make themselves look innocent. He tells him the prosecution have his fingerprints, no sign of forced entry, and with him being the last person to see her alive, the odds are stacked against him. Jamie mentions the weird package they received, but Jim tells him the mystery toy department is down the hall, and unless he can explain how a puppet is connected to the murder, he doesn't see any relevance. Jamie assures him the ventriloquist dummy is a bad omen in the town he grew up in, but continuing to troll him, Lipton calls out Jamie on the inconsistency in his account of what happened. He said that Lisa spoke to him moments before he found her body, but Lipton points out that she had no tongue, meaning that would not have been possible.
Personally, I think only someone high as a kite would kill his wife and then pose her as a mannequin.
Regardless, after being informed they're not pressing charges for now, he defiantly storms out, telling Jim he will use that time to do their job for them. No doubt another line spouted by the guilty. Sure enough, when he goes back home, he opens the packaging of the delivery box, and printed on it is the amazing Mary Shaw and Billy in Raven's Fair, indicating this is one of the very dolls owned by that creepy lady in the poem. With nothing to live for, the devastated Jamie heads back to Raven's Fair, now a decrepit town in ruins. Arriving at his father's estate, he's welcomed by Edward's new wife, Ella.
We haven't even been introduced. I'm Ella. Well, I guess I'm your stepmother.
Apologizing for not having introduced herself before now, she guides him upstairs where Edward can be heard yelling. Ella explains his father recently had a stroke, and Jamie is not surprised to hear the man bellowing from one of the rooms. Notably, Edward's face is very pale and sickly, and beside him is an oxygen tank to help him breathe. With Ella standing behind him for support, his father tells him that he wants to patch up their relationship. He insists on taking care of the funeral, but Jamie tells him he doesn't need his help, and that he actually only came here to ask him one question, if he remembers a poem his mother used to tell him. Confused, Edward looks up to Ella and says he's not sure. Jamie then begins to recount the verse. Beware the stare of Mary Shaw. She had no children, only dolls. If you see her in your dreams. As he struggles with the last part, Ella finishes it. Be sure you never scream. Before explaining it was merely a fable parents told their children to keep them in line. They offer to make up one of the rooms for him, but he declines, stating that he had a funeral to prepare. Ella then runs down and tells him that his father had changed, but Jamie leaves, not believing it. There is some truth to Ella's claim, but not for the same reason we might initially think.
Jamie, please. As your father, it's the least I can do.
You've done the least you can do my whole life.
Having not suspected the creepy doll, Jamie places Billy on a chair in the motel room and goes to bed. It's not long before the electricity in the room is disrupted and the voice of Lisa wakes him. He looks over to Billy and finds Mary Shaw in his place, but when he turns the light on, the doll is sitting as he had left it. This begins to weigh heavily on Jamie's mind, making him wonder whether he was going crazy. At the same time, Lisa's body arrives at the local coroner, Henry, who's taken aback by the sight, saying it can't be, meaning this was not the first time he'd seen a corpse in the same condition as Lisa in Raven's Fair. Hearing his wife's voice coming from the basement, Henry helps Marion up as she mumbles that some lady has arrived.
She's here now. I know it. She won't find me down here.
The following day, Jamie, Ella, and some family friends attend the funeral. When Jamie goes to get some fresh air in the woods, he's approached by Marion, who asks if he saw her when she killed his wife. Confused, he asks what she's talking about, and Marion begins to recite the verse about Mary Shaw. As Marion continues to tell him that she's here and nobody is safe, Henry arrives and apologizes. After telling his wife now is not the time, he confusingly tells Jamie that Marion did not know what she was talking about, and as the pair leave, she continues saying that he needs to bury the doll. Taking it all in, Jamie is drawn to the shrubs in front of him. Removing the vegetation, he's shocked to find the grave of Mary Shaw. Not wasting any time, he races back to the motel and recovers Billy. As he drives back to the cemetery, the doll looks over at him. Once he arrives, he finds a grave that was made for Billy right next to Mary's. Pondering who could have dug him up, he places the doll inside the grave as it turns its head to face him. Defiantly closing the coffin, he goes back to the car and is tormented by Billy, who appears to have inherited the Flash's speed force. Not only this, but after driving back to his motel and getting out of the shower, he's shocked to find Billy sitting on the bed waiting for him, along with Detective Jim Lipton, who isn't happy that he left town. Jamie informs him about the Mary Shaw legend, and it's here that we begin to realize why Jamie was still alive. Despite her many attempts to get him to scream, Jamie has a superpower. He doesn't spook easy. Taking the doll over to the funeral home, Jamie confronts Marion and Henry. Telling him not to say Mary's name and that he shouldn't have that doll with him, Henry finally opens up about the town's horrible secret. Mary Shaw was a famous ventriloquist in Raven's Fair. She was publicly humiliated when a young boy rudely claimed that he could see her lips moving during one of her performances. In the performance, we can see how agitated Billy was with the accusation that he wasn't real, and Mary appears to be struggling to keep him under control. Luckily, the discussion between them wins the crowd over, who applaud Mary's skill. Only problem is that Michael disappeared a few weeks later. His family and the community at large blamed the disappearance on Mary and lynched her. Honoring her will and last request, Henry's father turned her body into a doll and buried her with the 101 dolls that she called her children. Only a boy at the time, Henry had actually walked into his father's office and knocked her casket over. Rising up, Mary did her best to scare him, but the boy was spared by silence. Learning she used to live in the old theatre, Jamie heads there while Lipton begins digging up her grave. Of course, it's not long before Mary claims the life of Henry for spilling the beans. After investigating the theatre and speaking to his father, Jamie finds out that Michael was actually his great uncle. Getting revenge, the Ashen family had forced Mary to scream before cutting her tongue out. Because of this, her vengeful spirit began seeking revenge on their entire bloodline and those involved by killing them using the same method. Jamie, Lisa, and everyone else is essentially caught up in the collective sin of Ravensfair, and Lipton has thrown himself into the mix by deciding to explore Jamie's wild theories. When Jamie gets a call from Henry telling him to meet him back at the theatre to prove his innocence, he takes off, followed by Lipton in close pursuit. Once there, he's guided by the voice of Henry to a room.
Henry! Come on, Jamie. I'm up here.
Lipton walks in armed with a shotgun, saying it can't be Henry, as there were no other boats to have brought him here. They continue to follow the voices, and Jamie reminds him not to scream. They make their way into a room with all of Mary's dolls and an empty case labelled Billy. They also find Michael, who'd been turned into a marionette. It gets silent and the dolls begin to move on their own, casting their attention to a creepy clown doll rocking in a chair in the corner. When Jamie calls out Mary Shaw's name, the doll stops rocking. He calls out her name once again, and the doll leans into the light and opens its eyes. He asks what it wants, and Mary tells him her goal is to silence those that had silenced her. When asked about Michael, she explains it was hard to find the right parts to make the perfect doll, and after publicly mocking her, his uncle gave her a wicked idea to use his parts to make him into a human doll. When asked about her motives surrounding the death of Lisa, Mary reveals her shocking truth. Lisa was actually pregnant with Jamie's child and about to let him know. Appearing behind the doll, Mary lifts it up and reveals her inhumanly long tongue composed of all the tongues she had claimed. Realizing that Mary was essentially living through her dolls, Lipton blows it away and begins shooting the other ones. It's at this point that Jamie throws a lantern on the display case, starting a massive fire that engulfs the theatre. Unfortunately, in their hasty escape, the ground collapses beneath them, and as Lipton falls, he begins screaming and is killed by Mary. Jamie continues to hold his screams in and manages to swim away to safety as the theatre burns to the ground. Remembering that Billy was the only doll that was left, he races to Henry's home. Finding Marion holding her husband's dead body, he asks where the doll was and is shocked to hear that his father had arrived and taken it. With nobody left to believe his wild story and fueled by inconsolable anger, Jamie goes off to stop the curse once and for all. Arriving at the family estate, he hears Billy's voice asking why he buried him. Following it into a room, he's attacked by Mary, who does her best to scare him again. Like a Giga Chad, instead of screaming, he throws Billy into the fire. Thinking he defeated her, Jamie lets his guard down when he spots his father in the corner. Much to his horror, he discovers Edward was also a life-size doll, and that he was being controlled by Ella, the perfect doll that Mary had been working on at the very beginning. When Ella turns to him and asks, "Now who's the dummy?" Shocked to the core, Jamie finally loses his composure and lets off a scream, sealing his fate. We then cut to Jamie's voice being used by Mary to recite the poem as she looks over photos of a new collection, including Henry, Lipton, Edward, Jamie, Lisa, and of course Ella the perfect doll herself. Mary then closes the book, having finally completed her revenge. Well, that's all for today, folks. A huge thanks to everyone who took part in the latest poll. If there's anything else you'd like for me to explore, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
You're a free man for now. Good.
Give me more time to do your job for you.